Hey everybody, it's your boy Hex here, and today I'm very excited to continue my incredibly time-intensive and ultimately pointless quest to typecast myself as yet another redundant tech tuber as I discuss with you today the Viotek GN32LD. So, where to begin? It's an interesting display that uses the newest 32-inch curved vertical alignment panels from AU Optronics that boast a resolution of 2560 by 1440, a 144Hz refresh rate, and FreeSync, all in one package. Because I'm not a color science engineer, or hell, even a competent photo or video editor, I'm not really going to talk about color gamuts or calibration, at least not a whole lot, but I will be talking about things that are important to the average end user and or gamer who are, let's be honest, the target demographics for this monitor. So without further ado, here we go. Alright, I'm looking over my footnotes right now and there's a lot to talk about. So I'm going to split this bad boy up into a few different categories, and the first one that we're going to talk about is aesthetics and build quality. So I'll just get this out of the way first. In my humble opinion, pretty much everything about how this monitor looks is tacky. The box it comes in looks tacky, the monitor from any other angle but the front looks pretty tacky. And while I know they were trying to style it for gamers, it ended up looking like a product of a thankfully bygone era of cringy cheap plastic cases that looked like they were straight out of an episode of Power Rangers. I believe the red faux vents in the bottom corners harbor speakers of indeterminate origin, but I cared so little about them that I didn't even bother to test them. I've never heard speakers on a monitor that were worth a fuck anyway, so I sincerely doubt that this monitor is a departure from that norm. The white diagonal accents near the top are actually diffusion panels for some integrated LED lighting. I'm not sure what the point of this is, but hey, in an age where even mouse pads have RGB integration, I guess they figured why the hell not. Anyway, yeah, I'm pretty sure the model name is a pseudo acronym for great news, it's 32 inches of limp dick aesthetics, everybody. Woo! I don't know, that's the effect it had on me anyway. The base seems to be made of reasonable quality, although again, the cheap red plastic accents don't do it any favors. The neck of the stand is shrouded in cheap, creaky plastic and is secured into place with a single bolt. The mount head itself provides height and tilt adjustments, but no rotate or swivel. For $550, I would have really liked to see all four parameters of movement or adjustment in this stand. Rotate can be useful for compensating for a slightly unlevel desk, for example, and swivel is just nice to have if you ever need to change your viewing angle a bit, without dragging the whole stand along with it. I guess my recommendation here is just to invest in a high-quality VESA arm mount that can support monitors up to 32 inches and or 25 to 30 pounds. I personally use the Amazon Basics Premium arm mount and it has been totally spectacular. It's a bit pricey, but absolutely no sagging or unwanted movement problems. I'll put a link in the description below, and no, I'm not being paid to say that, I just like the damn thing. Speaking of VESA mounting, the implementation that Viotek used to accomplish it is a little bit, well, it's a bit on the janky side. It involves removing the stock stand's back plate and replacing it with 4 screw extensions, which you then screw your VESA mount into directly when you're mounting it. No fancy bracket or anything like that, just screws. Which I guess works well enough. Hopefully. Please. From the front, this monitor doesn't actually look that bad. In fact, I'd say it's very reminiscent of the styling that Acer went with for their Predator line. It's sort of a gunmetal color that encompasses most of the front of the perimeter of the bezel, which as you can see is quite thin, with red accent text at the bottom simply reading Viotek, just in case you forgot who your daddy is. So to wrap up, I guess you could say this thing is a little bit beauty and a little bit beast. It's reasonably professional from the front, especially if you ditch the stand in lieu of a VESA mount, but pretty darn gaudy from the backside. Since I sincerely hope that you're going to be looking at the front more than the back, I guess we'll just call it a slightly favorable wash. Category number 2, curvature, size, aspect ratio, and resolution. So this is a 32-inch 2560 by 1440 16:9 display, which puts its pixel density at around 91 pixels per inch. This is exactly the same density as a 24-inch 1080p display, which I think comes a little bit close to being grainy at times. I much prefer a pixel density of around 110, which is what you'll find on most newer 34-inch ultra-wides and 27-inch 16:9s. Now, being a 16:9 aspect ratio display, it is firmly outside the realm of the ultra-wide master race fad going on right now. Okay, don't crucify me. I actually love ultra-wide, and it's not a fad. It's an extremely versatile aspect ratio, and I enjoyed the hell out of my Acer X34 while I had it. In fact, it's because of this first-hand experience that I can say with complete certainty that some developers just can't seem to wrap their heads around the whole ultra-wide / high refresh rate thing. A true gentleman wouldn't name any names, but suffice it to say, they are out there. And that's not even getting into how poorly legacy games, which have no chance of ever being updated again, handle 21:9. I mean, when I play Final Fantasy XI on ultrawide, everything is stretched out and warped and the whole thing looks like straight dog shit. But I digress. So I guess you could say I got this display because it's kind of a nice compromise between the vast expanse of a nice big ultrawide and the compatibility of a traditional 16:9 display. New games look great on it, and old games / poorly coded games don't complain. I love that. And coming from an ultrawide, it's kind of a luxury that you take for granted. The curvature of this display, and oh yeah, by the way, it's curved, is pretty steep at 1800R. Now, I know what you're thinking, there's too many goddamn numbers, and I agree. But this one's actually pretty simple. It just means that the monitor could be thought of as a cross-section of a circle with a radius of 18 meters, or 1800 millimeters, hence the term 1800R. So basically, the smaller the number, the tighter the curvature, and that's about all there is to it. Personally, I don't feel the curvature was necessary on a non-ultrawide display. The bow tie effect is pretty pronounced, which unfortunately makes lines seem about as straight as Sir Elton John. Not ideal for professional work, but not a big deal otherwise. So to wrap up, the size kind of recaptures some of that ultrawide FOV feeling without sacrificing compatibility with older games, and 1440p in my opinion remains one of the best resolutions for gaming right now. While it doesn't have the acuity of 4K, it's still sharp and looks great at normal viewing distances, without all those extra pixels to push. The OSD or on-screen display of this monitor is of the very basic under-monitor button type. I harbor a special hatred of it because every time I touch it, it seems to discharge a massive bolt of static electricity into my fingertip. There's not really that much to talk about. It has all of your basic functions that you'd find in most monitors: input, select, gamma, color, temperature, etc, etc. There is one little gem that will probably change your perspective of the monitor, however, and that's the RGB range selection. We'll talk more about what that does in a minute, but essentially it's a toggle that changes between a limited RGB gamut and a full RGB gamut. And pro tip, always run it on full. If I had any suggestions for Viotek, it would be to add a joystick to make navigation more intuitive. And as a personal wish, I wish that I didn't get flashbacks from the Green Mile every time I touch one of the buttons. Seriously, I make a pact with God every time I reach out to press one of them. So finally, this brings us to the final topic for discussion, the display tech, refresh rate, and variable sync technology. I'll just get the latter two out of the way first, since they're the most clean cut and dry. First, variable refresh technology. It's pretty darn neat. AMD's implementation is called FreeSync, which is based on an open standard, and Nvidia's implementation is called G-Sync, which relies on a proprietary module for functionality. This technology allows your graphics card to basically control the refresh rate of your monitor, so it's always perfectly in sync with the frame rate that your GPU is currently rendering at. In actuality, it's a little bit more complicated than that. First, FreeSync doesn't do dick if you're driving the game at a surplus over the maximum refresh rate of your monitor, so you'll also need to keep VSync and or FastSync and or Enhanced Sync enabled as well. Alternatively, you can just use a frame rate limiter to keep your refresh rate in check. Second, every FreeSync and or G-Sync monitor has an effective range in which they can actually deploy their adaptive sync technology. In this monitor's case, that range is between 48 frames a second and 144 frames per second. If you stray above or below that range, FreeSync shuts off. At least until you re-enter that range. As always, FreeSync's biggest disadvantage is that it requires the use of an AMD card. I'm currently using a Vega 64, but it's frankly no match for Nvidia's best offering. Not by a long shot, actually. Vega itself is still missing a bunch of features, like primitive shaders and tile-based rasterization and all that other stuff they said it would have, but it doesn't have. Fine wine. Anyway, the last thing I'm going to talk about is probably one of the more divisive topics that you will run aground upon on your quest for a new monitor. I'm talking, of course, about IPS versus VA panels. IPS stands for in-plane shifting, whereas VA stands for vertical alignment. No twisted pneumatic though, I hate TN panels. And I'll be real with you, I'm an IPS guy. I like the accuracy of colors that a good IPS panel produces, their unflinching viewing angles, and their snappy pixel response times. Now, admittedly, IPS glow is a common gripe against these types of panels, and while it doesn't bother me, it's a very real annoyance for people who like to use their computers mostly in a dimly lit setting. IPS monitors are almost ubiquitously more expensive than any other panel type save for OLED. If you want OLED right now, you better be ready to offer up your firstborn. VA panels were created as a compromise between TN panels and IPS panels. You want extremely high refresh rates and good color reproduction? Well, only a VA panel can provide you with both concurrently. Drawbacks to a VA panel include prominent ghosting and the invariably more detrimental black crush effect. Black crush is the loss of shadow detail in dimly lit scenes when viewed on axis from directly in front of the monitor. It's a trait intrinsic to all VA panels. All of them display it to varying degrees, and it cannot be calibrated out without adversely affecting picture quality. When I first fired this puppy up, I was shocked at how prominent the black crush effect was. Shades of gray just sort of melded into black, leaving blotches of emptiness everywhere I looked. Then, after a couple hours of farting around with it, I found the RGB range selector. Now, out of the box, this monitor runs in a limited RGB mode that seems to inhibit the number of colors it can display. Switching this to full RGB mode immediately made a huge improvement to black level and granularity. Look at these before and after pictures. I mean, they're stark. So where do I stand on this monitor? Well, I really like it and I'll be keeping it, which is something I'm kind of surprised about. I don't usually like VA panels for the aforementioned issues, but the specs were exactly what I was looking for, and aside from the need to use an AMD graphics card, there's really not a whole lot not to like about it. It can be had for around $550, which is considerably cheaper than a G-Sync alternative. Actually, at the time of writing this, I don't think there are any 32-inch 16:9 144Hz G-Sync monitors out there, so this would be your only bet if these are the specs that interest you. Anyway, that's about it from me, you guys. I'm still kind of getting used to making videos, so if you found this video useful or funny or whatever, just go ahead and leave me a comment below, and it would mean the world to me if you hit that little like button and subscribed as well. So yeah, that's a wrap. You guys rock, you kick some serious ass, and I'll catch you all next time.